The first crack of thunder rolled over the ridge like a cannon shot, sharp enough to make us all stop mid-step. I remember looking out across the valley. What had been a clear, bright sky just an hour earlier was now bruising into a deep slate grey, clouds piling fast and heavy. The wind came next, tugging at our jackets and whipping loose straps on the packs. We were high, too high, with sheer drops on either side and no real cover in sight. It's a strange feeling, being caught, that exposed. The air was charged, prickling the hair on my arms, and I knew we had only minutes before the storm was right on top of us. The ridge we were on wasn't long, half a mile maybe, but it was narrow, with steep, rocky descents both east and west. The trail back down wound slowly, switchback after switchback, and none of us wanted to be caught there if the rain hit hard. We gathered close, the five of us, packs pressing together, our voices raised against the gusts. Someone suggested heading back the way we'd come. Another pointed down the far side where the forest looked denser, maybe more forgiving. I could feel the tension in everyone's words, that edge of fear when people know they're running out of safe options. A bolt split the sky before we had the chance to decide. It hit so close the sound seemed to arrive before the light faded, a violent crack that rattled my teeth. The ridge trembled beneath my boots, and just like that, we were no longer debating. We were running, boots thudding against stone, packs swinging, every muscle screaming at me to get lower, to get anywhere but up there. The rain came then, first in thick, cold drops, then in sheets, hammering the rock until it gleamed slick and treacherous. I remember slipping once, catching myself on my palms, the granite tearing at the skin. Behind me, someone shouted. They'd stumbled too, but we pressed on. The forest on the far slope looked impossibly far away, a smudge of green through the curtain of rain. The thunder rolled again, constant now, overlapping so much it felt like the world itself was shaking apart. The thought kept pounding in my skull. We had to move fast, but one bad step could mean a fall we wouldn't walk away from. And then, just ahead, we spotted a break. A narrow gully cut into the slope, lined with scrub pines and loose rock. It wasn't ideal, but it led downward, away from the ridge's crown. We hesitated for only a second before plunging toward it, every one of us hoping it would bring us the safety of the tree line before night fell. The gully was steeper than it looked from the ridge, the kind of slope where you had to half slide, half scramble just to keep moving. Rocks broke loose under our boots, clattering down ahead of us, and every time they skipped out of sight, I pictured them tumbling all the way to the valley floor. The rain had already turned the soil to slick clay, and we leaned hard on the scrubby pines for balance, the bark tearing into our wet palms. Above us, lightning forked again, so bright it seemed to bleach the world for a heartbeat, and the thunder followed like a physical shove between the shoulder blades. None of us said much now. Our breathing and the storm filled the silence. At one point, my buddy Kyle lost his footing completely. I saw him go, sliding sideways, his pack pulling him off balance. I lunged and managed to grab a strap, my boots skidding, my shoulder nearly yanked from its socket. Somehow, with both of us clawing at roots and dirt, we stopped just shy of a drop where the gully narrowed into a chute. He looked up at me, eyes wide with that flash of raw fear, and I'll never forget the way his breath came out in ragged gasps. We didn't need to say anything, we just kept moving. Lower down, the gully widened a little, and we paused for the first time, huddling under the scant shelter of the leaning pines. The rain hammered down so loud it drowned out the sound of our own voices. We pulled out the map, but it was nearly useless, paper smeared and soft from the wet. All we could tell was that if we kept trending west, we'd hit the tree line, and somewhere below that ran a creek. If we could reach the water, we could follow it to lower ground, maybe even find a flat spot to make camp before darkness swallowed the mountain. The trouble was, the storm wasn't letting up. The light was fading faster than it should have, storm clouds dragging the evening closer, and the rain showed no sign of breaking. Every shadow looked like it might swallow the trail. Every flash of lightning made us more aware of just how exposed we still were. The ridge was behind us now, but the mountain was far from forgiving. We adjusted straps, tightened belts, and pressed on. My legs burned from the strain, mud pulling at each step like it wanted to drag me under. Still, there was a kind of determination in the group now, fear mixed with grit. No one wanted to be caught up here when night came fully. The gully began to flatten as promised, and the sound of rushing water reached us faintly through the storm. Relief sparked through me at that sound, though it was tempered by a worry I didn't want to voice aloud. In a storm like this, creeks could swell fast, turning into torrents that were just as dangerous as the ridge had been. We pushed forward anyway, the smell of wet pine and raw earth filling our lungs, the thought of running water pulling us on. None of us knew what waited when we reached that creek, but it felt like the only path that might lead us out of the storm's grasp before the dark closed in completely. By the time we reached the creek, the roar of it was louder than the thunder. What should have been a narrow, ankle-deep stream spilling across rocks had become a raging, brown torrent, swollen by the storm. Branches and whole logs raced past, carried on the current like twigs. My heart sank at the sight. It wasn't just a creek anymore, it was a barrier. We stood at the edge, soaked through and shivering, watching the water churn. The far bank wasn't more than 20 feet away, but it might as well have been another world. We moved downstream, following the water in hopes of finding a safer crossing. Lightning lit the valley in sharp flashes, showing the banks climbing steeper and rockier the farther we went. The trail, if there had ever been one, was long gone under mudslides and fallen branches. My boots were heavy with water, squelching with every step, and every time I looked up, the clouds seemed lower, pressing down like a ceiling. I could see the worry growing in the others' faces. Kyle muttered something about turning back, but when we glanced behind us, the ridge loomed dark and jagged against the storm-lit sky. None of us wanted to climb back up there. We finally found a bend where the creek spread wider, splitting around a stony island in the middle. The current was still strong, but it was the first spot that looked remotely possible. We huddled together, shouting over the wind. The plan came quick and rough. 2 of us would go first with the strongest footing, ferrying across to the island. Then we'd help the others one by one. No ropes, no guarantee, but we didn't have the luxury of waiting. The light was fading, and the forest beyond the creek promised at least some shelter. I volunteered to go first with Megan, who was steady on her feet and lighter than the rest of us. We linked arms, stepping into the torrent. The water hit us like a wall, icy and powerful, tugging at our legs. I leaned into it, feeling the rocks shift under my boots, heart pounding with every uncertain step. Halfway across, a log slammed past, spraying us with cold water, and I almost lost my balance. Megan yelled something I couldn't hear, and together we stumbled onto the slick stones of the island, gasping with relief. Looking back, the others were dark silhouettes against the lightning flashes. They were already moving, Kyle leading the way with his jaw set tight. The creek thundered between us, daring us to try again. We waved them forward, bracing ourselves to help. The storm wasn't done with us, and night was coming fast. We were committed now. The only way out was through. Kyle stepped in first, just as I had, planting his boots wide and steady. Behind him was Sarah, then Dave bringing up the rear. They tried to link arms the way Megan and I had, but the current was fiercer now, the water rising even higher from the relentless downpour. Lightning cracked again, illuminating their faces, grim, pale and determined. I could see Kyle's jaw tight as stone, his eyes fixed on the rocks ahead. At first, they made good progress, each step deliberate, shoulders braced against the rush. But halfway across, the creek surged, a sudden swell that shoved them sideways like leaves in the wind. Sarah screamed, clutching at Kyle's sleeve, her other arm flailing in the current. Dave lunged to steady her, but the move threw him off balance. In that instant, I saw it, their whole line starting to unravel. "Hold on!" I shouted. Though my voice was snatched away by thunder, Megan and I splashed forward from the island, arms outstretched, desperate to reach them. Kyle managed to drag Sarah a step closer, but Dave wasn't so lucky. His foot slipped on the slick rock, and the current snatched him away with terrifying speed. I'll never forget the look on his face. Shock first, then raw fear, as the torrent spun him downstream. Without thinking, I lunged off the island, plunging back into the water. It hit like ice knives, spinning me sideways, but I fought for footing, bouncing off rocks and clawing for anything solid. Dave's pack had snagged on a half-submerged log, and he clung to it, coughing and choking as the current battered him. I scrambled toward him, slipping under once, The world reduced to bubbles and roaring water. When I surfaced, I was close enough to grab his arm. He clamped onto me with a strength born of panic, nearly pulling me under again. Somehow, braced against the log, I steadied us both long enough for Megan and Kyle to reach out and haul us toward the island. We collapsed there in a heap, gasping and shivering. Every one of us soaked to the bone. Dave coughed so hard I thought he might pass out, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered in that moment. None of us said anything right away. The storm still raged, thunder rolling across the valley, and we were too drained to waste words. We just sat there, pressed against each other, watching the black forest loom across the second channel of the creek. The problem was clear. Half our group was on one side, the other half stranded on the island. The rain wasn't letting up. The water kept rising, and the last of the daylight was bleeding away behind the ridge. The forest promised safety, but it still stood on the far bank, just out of reach. And the longer we waited, the more dangerous the crossing would become. The choice ahead of us wasn't simple. Risk another crossing in the dark, or try to make camp on the island and pray the water didn't rise high enough to swallow it before morning. We huddled close on that stony island, the storm raging overhead, every heartbeat measured against the thunder. The water had already risen enough to cover some of the lower rocks, and I could see the current tearing harder with each passing minute. Staying put until morning was no longer an option. The island would be gone before the night was through. Kyle spoke first, his voice raw from shouting against the storm. "We go now, all together. No stopping this time." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a decision, and deep down we all knew he was right. If we hesitated, the mountain would make the choice for us. We stripped what we could from our packs, leaving behind extra weight, cooking gear, spare clothes, anything we could do without. The Siui Chayuji essentials, shelter, food, and a few dry layers sealed in bags were all that mattered now. One by one, we cinched down straps and tied what we had as tightly as possible. Lightning flashed again, throwing our shadows long and strange across the water, and I caught myself thinking how small we looked against the fury of the storm. We linked arms again, this time in a tighter knot, shoulder to shoulder, braced like a single body. Megan took the lead, planting her boots with deliberate precision, while I held on to Dave, who was still shaky but determined. Step by step, we pushed into the current. The water surged at our waists now, colder than bone, threatening to tear us apart. Every move forward felt like a battle. Rocks shifted beneath us, unseen branches clawed at our legs, and more than once the current nearly knocked the breath from my chest. At the halfway point, the creek tried to claim us again, slamming hard into our side. We staggered, but this time no one slipped. We gritted our teeth, leaned into each other, and forced our way through. When my boots finally scraped the far bank, it felt unreal, like the earth itself had welcomed us back. One by one, we dragged ourselves onto solid ground, collapsing into the soaked grass beneath the trees. We didn't celebrate. Not really. Exhaustion weighed too heavy, and the storm still rumbled overhead. But there was a quiet relief, the kind that sinks deep and stays. We moved just far enough into the forest to find shelter under a stand of pines, pitched what little gear we had managed to save, and crawled into damp sleeping bags. The night was long and restless, the storm drumming on the canopy above, but we were alive, and we were together. That was enough. By morning, the world had softened. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean, the sky a pale, forgiving blue. The creek had calmed back to a stream, innocent looking in the daylight. We stood at its bank for a long while, each of us quiet, each of us carrying the memory of what it had been just hours before. It struck me then how thin the line is between safety and danger out there, how quickly a clear sky can turn into a fight for survival. That ridge, that storm, that crossing, they reminded me of something I sometimes forget. The wild doesn't care about our plans. Out there, every step, every choice carries weight, and sometimes the only way forward is through, together.